Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Plato with Anitian, and this is Automate Security, or Face the Wrath of the Millennials. And I want to thank all of you for attending today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to spend a little bit of time with me and the Anitian folks to talk about what is a pretty interesting and challenging topic that we're facing in information security right now. So thanks again for coming to this webinar. As you can see, I'm doing this from my office here at Anitian. We have new offices. We just moved into a new building, and I thought it might be nice to actually get on camera so everybody could see me for a change, and be able to, I can interact with each of you. So while I'm doing this this presentation, if you have any questions or any comments or any thoughts, please feel free to use the chat or the question feature within GoToWebinar. And when I get to the end of the presentation, I'll go through those, and we'll try to answer them or at least respond to each one of them. Aside from that, we are recording this, so if at any point you zone out or you got to go grab a coffee, don't worry about it. We'll put a recording of this up on YouTube, and you can listen to it later. So, but thanks again for attending. So let's just jump right to it here. So most of you know who I am, right? I'm Andrew Plato. I'm President and CEO of Anitian. Looking from the names on the list of the attendees, I think a lot of you, you know who Anitian is, you know our story. I think the key thing here is I've been doing information security for 20 plus years. I've run Anitian since 1995. The last few years I've been doing a lot of industry analysis work. You'll notice I have another job up there. I'm a principal at TrueBit Cyber Partners, which is an M&A and due diligence or technical due diligence consulting firm I started with 4 other industry analysts. So one of the things that I do a lot these days is analyze the industry, analyze technologies, and analyze trends that are going on. This particular presentation is really a series of research studies and presentations we're doing into the changing workforce and the impact that has on information security. Again, I think a lot of you know Anitian, you know our story, but if you don't, real quickly, at Anitian, we believe information security is essential for growth, innovation, and prosperity. If you look back in history, all great civilizations had security as a fundamental component. You want to go the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs approach, security is number 2 from the bottom of that pyramid. Security is an essential component of our civilization, of our lives, of our community. We need it, we depend upon it. And so because of that belief, we're on a mission to build great security leaders. That's our mission statement. And this presentation is really all about that. What I want to do today is help you become a better leader. The information I'm going to share, the ideas, the research, is all about helping you just be that better leader. And then these 4 logos that you're looking at, these are our practice areas. We do risk assessment, that's our risk now practice area. We have a compliance practice, PCI, HIPAA, ISO, etc. We do penetration testing, code review, social engineering, the full gamut of security testing services. And then of course our innovative threat intelligence service, Sherlock, where we actually can analyze data in your environment and look for indicators of compromise. Okay, so what's this presentation about today? As I said, my core intent really today is just help you be a better security leader and build a better security program. This topic, like a lot of the topics and a lot of the presentations I do, is a pretty big topic. So the hope and the ultimate goal is to just kind of whet your appetite, give you some good ideas, get you thinking about the strategy of your security program in relation to automation and relation to workforce development, which we see these 2 things as very closely related to each other. The other key intent I want to do is really help you guys get prepared for this demographic shift that's happening. And I'm going to talk more about that as we get into it. And of course, my other big intent is I want to demonstrate Anitian's value, the value of us as a business and what we can do for you. So here's a quick outline of the presentation. And we've got a lot of slides, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. And I want to start with our hypothesis, sort of what got this whole issue or topic started. And with that, I begin with our good, well-bearded friend here, Mr. Charles Darwin. I put this quote in the very beginning of this presentation, and actually another one I did about workforce, because I think it's very relevant to what's happening in the workforce, but it's also extremely relevant to what's happening to us in information security. Now, what's funny about this quote is Charles Darwin never actually said this quote. It's actually been attributed to him over the years, but it's a good quote, and it effectively summarizes, of course, his core principles about evolution. This notion that it's not about strength or intelligence that allows you to survive or allows species to flourish, but it's about their adaptability. And this principle is very applicable when we look at workforce or when we look at information security. It isn't about being strong or even that smart. It's about being adaptable. That's really the key criteria of success. And so throughout this presentation, you're going to hear me use the words like agility and ability to affect change. These are core principles that are going to allow all of this to work. It's all about evolving our systems and our workforces forward. The next big premise we have in this topic, and frankly a lot of topics we do these days in Anitian, is this notion that when you get right down to it, all breaches, all security problems, all the things that we as security professionals deal with are ultimately caused by humans. Firewalls don't wake up one morning and say, you know, I'm just not feeling it today. I think I'm just gonna let all the packets go through. You know, that doesn't happen ever. You know, your FireEye appliance, you know, doesn't get to the end of the day and say, you know, I've kind of had it with this place, and you know, I just don't think I'm going to scan things. I'm just going to stop scanning things because, I don't like it anymore. That never happens. Whereas humans, of course, that does happen. When you get right down to it, it's humans that program the systems. It's humans that build the apps. It's humans that configure the network. It's humans that run the systems. It's humans that make the decisions ultimately. And we use technology to help make us better. So it's human error that is the problem. It's not technology error. Technologies really don't make mistakes. They just kind of do whatever we tell them to do. And so it's important to understand that balance, because we got to put technology where it belongs, and we got to put humans where they belong. And one of the key challenges we face in information security right now is technology and humans are kind of in the wrong places. So the next big hypothesis we have is that this, which is a statistical reality, although I find this number a little on the high side, I definitely believe it's applicable in some industries. We are facing a cybersecurity staffing, I don't even think crisis is effective enough to word. There simply isn't enough people to run all the gear and systems we have. Now you could say, well, then we need to hire more people. Well, that's one dimension of the problem, but automation is the other dimension of this problem. So this principle of automation and workforce development, this issue, this fact, is extremely relevant to our information security program of the future. I've seen statistics that say by 2020, we're going to have upwards of 10 million unfilled cybersecurity positions. And that's a lot of positions. The next big point I would make is this. Automation is familiar to millennials. Now, we're going to talk a lot about millennials and workforce development and all that, but this is probably the core principle of this entire presentation. And let me walk you through what I mean by this. When I use the word automation, I don't necessarily mean like robots and manufacturing programs. What we mean by automation is really the fullest concept of this word. Millennials and younger generations right now have grown up in a world where access to information and automation was widely available to them. When I was a kid, you know, we didn't have Google, we didn't have a lot of the technologies and the smartphones and this we have, and I know that makes me sound like an old, you know, an old guy, but I'm not even that old, quite frankly. You know, I'm definitively a Gen Xer. But a lot of the millennials, they grew up in a world where they've always had Google, they've always had Facebook, they've always had these platforms, so they're very familiar to them. They understand them, they get them. You know, that's a generational thing. Quite frankly, you know, even I've grown up in the computer industry. I mean, I've had technology around me, and many of us have, all of our lives. These things are familiar to us, which means they're comforting, which means we derive value from them. This is relevant because automation, the general concept of automation, is very familiar to millennials who are taking over the workforce. And because of that, it's also taking over our information security programs. This notion of automation being familiar to these generations is going to drive a lot of things. I mean, if you look at all the businesses, all the apps, all the things that are happening, it's all about kind of automation. How do we automate processes? How do we automate our lives? How do we automate our social interactions? All of this is automation. Facebook and Instagram and all these little logos you see here, they're all some level of automation, doing things for us. That's what technology is quite good at. Doing things for us, automation, doing the same task over and over again. So this principle that it's familiar, automation is familiar to millennials is going to color the rest of this presentation in a big way, and it of course is the basis of this presentation. So let's talk a little bit more about these millennials, because this is of course a core issue. This is a big concept. This is of course a big workforce issue. So over the last few years, I have spent, and here at Anitian, we've spent a lot of time studying this workforce shift. This is a big issue for companies worldwide. I'm a member of a CEO group, and we all sit around and we talk about our challenges as CEOs. And one of the core challenges that businesses are having today is how do you recruit and retain younger generations? How do you get them engaged in the workforce? How do you keep them engaged in the workforce? And the reason this is such a huge topic for all businesses and information security as well is because of this fact. By 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials. In the United States, this number is a little bit lower. It's more like 50 or 60%, but that's still majority. Like it or not, the millennials are taking over. And you can get mad and you can call them names and you can say whatever you want, but the future belongs to them. And my generation, Gen Xers, we're going to be, by 2025, we're going to start leaving the workforce. And by 2025, there's not going to be any baby boomers in the workforce. Baby boomers right now are leaving the workforce at a rate of about 30,000 per day. And by 2025, there's going to be almost zero left. And my generation is going to start leaving at that point, which means it's going to be all millennials and then some of the next generation, which they call like Gen Z. So this demographic shift that we talk about, it's not like an idea. It's not like an issue floating out there in the ether. It is a demographic and factual reality. Your workplace is going to be mostly millennials within the next few years. Right now, millennials actually occupy the biggest part of the U.S. workforce. 53 million millennials in the U.S. workforce compared to about 50 million Gen Xers. So they're already comprise the bigger, a majority chunk of the workforce, and then they're going to be a majority of the entire workforce by 2025. So your information security program, whether you like it or not, has got to evolve, because the programs we've been building over the last decade or so have been built for a workforce of today or yesterday. We got to start building information security programs for tomorrow. So what does that really mean? Well, it means you've got to start thinking about who is going to dominate that workforce, and it's going to be these guys, right? Now, every presentation where we talk about generations invariably has a slide like this or multiple slides like this where we, kind of generalize and pander to each one of the generations. I kind of want to just zoom in on the millennials here because, of course, that's the crux of this presentation. But what's really relevant here is, you can come up with all these phrases, millennials are this, they're that, they're socially conscious, they're idealistic, whatever. And those may be all true. I mean, I've read 1,000, well, it feels like 1,000, probably like a couple dozen, but felt like 1,000. I've read a lot of reports and a lot of these studies on generations. And, these these adjectives they apply to each of them are kind of like, whatever. Here's one thing though. When I think about each of the generations, when it relates to information security and a workforce sort of engagement, I try to think about what's that sort of core principle that motivates this group. And when you think about millennials, I think of the word authenticity. This is a generation that is saying, I want an authentic workplace. I want authentic leaders. I want authentic engagement. And I want authentic information security and IT systems. I want an environment that I can believe in, that I can trust, that I know is going to help me get better. I want leaders who are going to be authentic, who are going to work with me. When we talk about authentic leadership, what that means is really bringing down the classical hierarchy. The big move in a lot of organizations these days is to create these very flat organizations where there isn't some complex hierarchical tree of leadership. It's a bunch of independent teams interacting. This is important because this is the workplace of the future. And this is the information security program of the future, which means you need to automate. Because authenticity and automation have an odd sort of relation to each other. And as we talk more, I think you'll see how those two start to connect. Now, there's some other interesting facts about millennials that I think are relevant for this conversation. One of the most educated generations in forever. This statistic always surprised me a little bit. I pulled it out of, I think, a Deloitte and Touche report. 79% have a college degree. And I believe that's in the United States, by the way. That's huge. It's way more than Gen Xers and even quite a bit more than baby boomers. It's a very educated generation. So we're not talking about, I think it's easy for some of us, particularly my generation, to kind of make fun of millennials, but they're well educated. They've worked hard. Here's another interesting statistic. 56% will reject a job that bans social media. Frankly, I think this number is low. I think it's probably growing, and particularly in some industries, particularly in our industry. What that's saying is that you are interviewing people right now where if you tell them, well, no, we don't allow social media in our company, they're not going to take a job with you. They're not going to work with you, and they certainly aren't going to respect the company. This is important. Social media is an important part of their lives, and you could say, well, they're just going to have to shape up and get with the program. They're not. They're not going to work for you. And if they don't work for you, you've just slashed out 75% or at least 50% of the job applicants. That's essentially throwing away half the resumes you get for every job. And my guess is that if any of you have had to do recruiting in recent history, you don't want to throw away 50% of your resumes just because of a policy you have. Next big interesting statistic, 45% will choose flexibility over pay. And I can say from my perspective as a CEO, I see this a lot. This has actually been a big trend over the last few years is people coming into the workforce and saying, look, it's not all about money. Yeah, I want to make money. Who doesn't? It's more than this. I want a workplace that gives me flexibility. I want a workplace where I can work where I want, when I want. I want the ability to grow, to get training. I want the ability to trust that the things that need to get done are going to get done. And this is also a relevant component when we start talking about automation. But amongst all the things we've mentioned about millennials, I think the next statistic is going to scare some of you. 73% expect to modify and customize their work computer. That's a huge number. And I have to say, having worked in many different organizations that have high millennial sort of workforce, this is very true. Remember, this is a generation that has grown up with computers, technology, and automation in every dimension of their lives. This is an extension of their life. You think about the smartphone of today, right? These are parts of our lives. We do a lot of what we do on these devices, which means we expect to be able to do what we want with them. So when millennials, that sounds like they're zombies. When millennials come into the workforce, they expect this. And you could say, well, they're just going to have, again, you could say, well, they're shape up. They're not going to get that. Okay, they're not going to work for you. Or they're not going to respect it. And they're going to try to get themselves around this policy. So you can say all you want. Well, you can't customize anything. You can't do anything. It's all going to be allowed. They're just going to walk away. Or they're just going to work around it. And that's a challenge for us in information security. That's a huge challenge for us in information security because we don't like a lot of customization, right? We want everything to be the same because it's a lot easier to secure 1,000 similar systems than it is to secure even 10 totally disparate systems, right? So with all that in mind, what's really our problem here, right? We get it. The generations, millennials are taking over. There's not much us Gen Xers can do about it. This is the future, right? Well, here's problem number one, and I think we all know this problem, which is we're all getting hacked, right? 90% of organizations have had some successful attack. Well, frankly, I think that number's low. I think it's more like 100%. We're all getting attacked. We know this. I don't need to present a million different statistics to this. You all know this. We all know this. We've been dealing with it night and day, right? On top of that, it's expensive. Breaches are expensive. And this slide, I think pretty much every information security presentation for the next 5 years is going to have this slide. I think it's mandatory. And I think this comes from an IBM study. They're expensive. And, if you're in healthcare, they're really expensive. If you're in retail, it's a little bit better. But, I mean, you look at all the breaches that have been, the Targets, the Anthems, the Home Depots, all those, millions and millions of dollars. And jobs. People have lost their jobs. Okay, so what do we do? What's our answer to this as security professionals? How do we solve this problem? Well, traditionally, what we've been doing lately is this. We keep buying more and more and more and more and more and more gear. We keep buying technologies and appliances and software and threat intelligence and matrixization technologies and all these things. And we just lump more and more and more and more onto the network. And it's obviously not working because it ain't stopping the breaches. We have customers who've spent millions of dollars on technology stacked this high, sitting in server rooms, data centers, and it ain't doing the job, right? So then we take that and then we start we try to interface that with these just absolutely ludicrous policies and practices, right? Here's an example. I actually pulled this off the web from some organization. I changed it a bit, but I mean, it's a fact. The following document outlines the guidelines for the computing resource facilities. Nobody's going to read this. Nobody reads your policies. I absolutely guarantee you, you write a policy like this, it will get read by exactly 0 people, which means it gets followed by exactly 0 people. Because it's boring, okay? It's not engaging. And it doesn't matter how many times you say something. If you keep saying the same thing over and over again, no, people just tune out at some point. They don't care. You can't just keep saying it. No hacker has ever in the history of mankind been stopped because somebody had an extremely well-written policy. It isn't about the policy. It's about the person and the technologies being able to do the right things at the right moment. And if this is all you're doing, if you're screaming at people and saying, no, you can't do it. No, that's not allowed. No, you're not allowed. People just tune out. And then if you whack them over the head night and day with this just unrelenting complexity, well, that just creates even greater disengagement. Because you don't get it. It doesn't make sense. It's too hard. It's too overwhelming. We don't know how to make it all work, and it isn't comfortable. You look at the technologies of today, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, all these, they're simple. They're easy to interact with. They're human. The technologies that we love that are beside us night and day, they're simple. We can interact with them in an easy way. They give us what we want quickly. You see, there's this perception among some people, right, in information security, right, is if I build these big complex networks, and I outsource to these, big important, SOC operation centers, that I'm going to have this, big, massive team of important sounding people standing around, thinking about every problem. Okay, guys, we got a problem here. We're going to do something, and you've got this like war room of, important, impressive, brilliant minds working night and day. Okay, we've got to solve, we've got to track down the bad hacker guy here. But that's perception. The reality, unfortunately, well, it's a little more like this. You see, if the security of your organization is dependent upon a guy sitting at a console at 4 a.m. making a decision, you're going to get owned. There's just no two ways around it. You know why? It's real simple. Nobody makes a good decision at 4 a.m, okay? I don't care how trained you are. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much coffee you've drank. Bad decisions get made at 4 a.m, okay? And it's beyond that. I mean, that's sort of the funny way to think about it. The reality is that this guy, and those like him, Mr. Sleeping on the computer here, he doesn't have the capability to make those kind of decisions at that speed. That's not what humans are well designed for. We're not designed to do that. Our brains are not designed to do that. Our temperament. We are not in a position where we can make those kinds of decisions. And so this notion that you're going to have, the 24/7 SOC watching everything, and that somehow they're going to be able to, at a moment's notice, it's just not realistic. And because of that, you're kind of building this kind of disingenuous environment. You're monitoring things and trying to do all this, but this isn't really doing anything because you're not really stopping anything. And ultimately, that creates a situation where people just don't care because they know they're never going to really get caught. They know they're never really going to have to block or stop anything. And when people don't care, they start to wonder why the heck they're even here. And so they're like, why am I here? Why am I working here? This place does not value me. They don't value the way I look at things. They won't protect themselves. They won't automate things. They're trying to make me a computer, and I'm not a computer. People aren't computers, whether we like it or not. All right, this is where we hit rock bottom in the presentation. We say, well, is there any hope? Can this ever get any better? Are we ever going to be able to solve this? Are we ever going to be able to deal with all these breaches? Are we ever going to be able to get on top of this? Yes, we can do this. But we are going to have to evolve as an information security profession, as a practice, and our programs have got to now start evolving. We've got to start looking into the future and asking ourselves, how are we going to do this? And the way we're going to do this is with this. Nice, cute little kittens are going to solve all of our problems. No, they're not. They might, though. They'll certainly make you feel better. There's nothing wrong with having a good kitten, right? Here's what we're going to do. We need to start building safe zones. Now, this is a term I like to use. You can give it lots of other terms, but the idea of we want to create a part of your environment, a part of your network, a part of your systems, a part of your information security where there's a known set of automated activities. Because once we do that, we now have a zone of safety. And that's exactly why people like their Facebooks and their Googles and their smartphones, because it creates a space where we kind of know what's going on. We know what to depend on. One of the things I've come to learn in interacting and working with millennials is that they expect this. They expect us to automate this. We walk in and they're like, you mean you don't have it in the cloud? Why wouldn't you? It just makes sense. Come on. Because that's the safe zone for them. That's the familiar to them. It might not be familiar to us, but it needs to become familiar to us because, remember, they're taking over. And I say they because I am, of course, a Gen Xer. And the problem is if we don't build these safe zones, this area where we know what to expect, then we kind of wind up with this. Cats everywhere. And we're trying to herd them. I don't know if the video is coming across, but this is a hilarious video. It's like millions of cats in this one's house. Okay. So we need to automate the future. That's the answer. That's how we do it. That's how we build these zones where things are kind of safe, where we know what to expect. So why should you automate? Well, there's lots of great reasons to automate. First off, you can amplify your very, very limited resources. I don't think there's a single person listening to me right now who's going to say, oh yeah, I got plenty of people. We don't need any more cybersecurity talent. We're good. We got so many guys or girls. I mean, no way. We're not hiring anybody. I don't think anybody's saying that, okay? We all have limited resources. We got to amplify what we've got. We got to make more. We got to make the people we have be able to do more. And that's automation. We got to maximize the investment. You guys are spending a lot of money on these technologies. I know because we used to sell them and we know how much they cost and they're expensive. Okay? And if you aren't extracting every last nickel you spent on that product, why did you buy it? You know? More importantly, we've got to be able to accelerate our ability to respond to things. We've got to reduce dwell time. Average dwell time in an environment for an attacker is 229 days. That is ludicrously out of the question. We got to get that down into days. We're never going to get it down into minutes or hours. That's a little tough, but we can certainly bring that way down. And with automation, we can start to get to minutes and hours to some extent. We also got to standardize the way we react to things. We can't be relearning the wheel every time there's a problem. But more importantly, we need to reallocate people out of reaction jobs, out of firefighting, out of constantly running around trying to keep the wheels on the bus, trying to herd all those cats. And we got to put them into an analytical role because that's what people are good at. Human beings are great at analyzing big, complex morasses of data. Well, some humans are. Information security humans are. We're not very good at doing the exact same thing every single day for the remainder of our lives. That is not an engaging kind of thing for us. But push all those reasons for automation aside, there is, millennials, amplification, workforce, standardization, all those are very, very legitimate reasons. But there's frankly one reason that pretty much trumps them all. Not to use the word Trump, but it's this one. These guys love automation. Hackers and malware writers, they have embraced automation in every conceivable dimension of their nefarious activities. This is a pretty sinister looking guy, isn't it? They automate. They love automation. You look at the malware and the attacks that are going on today, I mean, they're ingenious. The automation they do, the way they step through things, the way malware can drop itself, unfurl, connect, morph into different things, try different types of vulnerabilities, encrypt itself using differing keys, interact with command and control infrastructures. I mean, it is, frankly, some of the most sophisticated technologies in the world are in the hands of hackers or in the hands of malware writers. And these guys have automated in every conceivable way, which means if they're automating, well, then you better automate too. So what can we automate? Well, we can automate a lot of things. You can automate all sorts of blocking and eradication, threat intelligence integration, data collection, alerting, reporting. There's tremendous amounts of things you can automate. But you're probably thinking, well, yeah, there's a lot of things that kind of get in the way of doing all that. And there's a lot of things that stand in our way of automation. Encryption is actually one of the more daunting problems. I know you might be saying, whoa, Andrew, you just said encryption is a problem? It is when you're trying to automate, and it is when you're trying to block. Encryption actually creates challenge for us because guess who's using encryption to encrypt their communications and their files? Malware writers. And when they encrypt, they can protect. And we can't see inside that. We don't know what's going on inside those encrypted channels. And if we don't know what's going on inside those encrypted channels, we can't block it. So encryption is a challenge for automation. Complexity is a challenge. Complacency, lack of strategy. If you have no strategy, how do you automate? If you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're doing, it gets really difficult to automate and establish those standardizations. Management, ignorance, plenty of reasons. But this, frankly, is the core reason why we don't automate. We're afraid. And the more I thought about this fear problem, I said, why don't people automate? Why don't they put in automated blocking? Why don't they automate cleanup? Why are we so resistant to doing this? Why do I keep here in 2016? Why do I keep hearing business leaders say, well, no, we can't have any auto blocking. No, that's way too dangerous. We can't lose one billionth of a penny here. No way, no how, can't happen. And I think about that and I'm like, why are they so resistant to this? Why is this such a problem for them? It seems to me, as a security guy, why wouldn't you do it? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it's because of how we perceive automation, particularly amongst the generations. And this is where I realized there's a huge fundamental break between my generation and baby boomers and millennials when it comes to the perception of automation. You see, in my generation, we view automation like that. We see automation as this remorseless killing machine, like the Terminator, because that's the narrative we've grown up with. Automation takes away humans. It takes away humanity. It makes you less than. It will kill you. It will bind together, right? We're always worried about AI binding together and killing humans, right? Terminator, all these movies, all these narratives, all these stories. Automation, for many of us, is a terrifying, killing, misering, dehumanizing process. And so we fear it. And we fear all forms of it because it doesn't feel human anymore. It feels like the Terminator. It's going to kill us. It feels no pity, no remorse, right? And we have to travel back in time to stop it, right? What's interesting, though, is that while that's what my generation, I think older generations view as automation, the narrative changes among younger generations because when they think of automation, they think of these type of robots. Remember Wall-E? He's cute, he's lovable, he helps us. He falls in love with another robot. Automation for millennials is nice. It's friendly. They like it. It's there to help them. It isn't a killing machine. It's a friend. Automated systems and technologies, these are good. They make our lives better. And you know what? They're right. They are. They're not automation is not a ceaseless killing machine. Well, not usually. Not in information security. I mean, it might be, drones and all that, but we're talking about computer systems here, right? This is a good thing for us. Now, once I realized that break between the two, that's where the problem is. We have to fight this narrative that's in our heads. We have a generation that perceives automation as a good, normal, natural thing. And we have a generation like mine and others who perceive it as a ceaseless killing machine. And that's what we really have to get over. Well, guess what? Here's the good news. You're way more automated than you even realize. You have more automation right now and you didn't even realize it. It's all over your network. You have bought next-gen firewalls. You've bought sandboxing. You've probably bought some of these technologies. And if you haven't, you're probably looking at buying them. And you should, because these are all great technologies that you need. And if you haven't bought all these network ones, then you certainly have some of these endpoint ones. I mean, duh, we all got antivirus, right? You should. I mean, and yeah, I know antivirus isn't perfect, but we're all looking at these kinds of technologies as well, right? We have patch management systems. You have to if you're PCI compliant, right? Vuln management system configuration systems. And at the enterprise level, we're investing in SIMs and vulnerability scanning and account lockouts, right? We all lock out accounts after a certain number of failed attempts. That's automation right there. So automation's really all over the place. It's all around us. We just don't always realize it. You see, It's not so much automation, and here's the grand fake out of this entire presentation. It's orchestrating this automation. We now need to bring this automation together and automate the automation. We need to orchestrate. We need to be able to link together multiple technologies. You see, the problem is that we invested a ton of money in our Palo Altos or Fortinets, our Splunks, our FireEyes, our Blue Coats. But guess what? None of them talk to each other. The Palo Alto blocks something. It doesn't go tell, the endpoint software, oh, you should do that too. Palo Alto doesn't talk to Fortinet. They don't even like each other. Okay. FireEye doesn't talk to anybody, right? Your endpoint, your McAfee or Symantec or Trend Micro, they don't talk to anybody. None of this stuff talks to each other. So none of it's working in harmony, which means you've got a bunch of these sort of islands all doing their own little thing and none of them working together. And guess who hates that? That's right, millennials, they hate that. Because they're always like, why aren't we working together on this? Why aren't we collaborating? Because that's another thing about millennials. They love collaboration. They believe in a team environment. For me, as a Gen Xer, I'll be honest with you, I like to kind of go it alone. I like to do it my own way. And that doesn't work in information security anymore. We can't go it alone. You're not going to win that battle. You need to automate. So we can automatically gather and store and catalog data. We can do this thing called establishing playbooks. And that's what I want to talk about quite a bit. I want to talk about playbooks. And I got a couple of screens here I want to show you in the next slide or two. More importantly, we can standardize this response that we have. The more we automate our reaction to events, the more likely they become, the more they become reliable, they become dependable, the more they build that safe zone, that area where we kind of know what's going to happen in this zone. It doesn't mean we solve all our problems. Yeah, there's plenty of things that happen outside of the safe zone. That's fine. That's where us humans get involved. That's where we get into the analytical process of, okay, within this circle, I know what happens. Outside of that circle, I don't. Now I can focus on what's outside of it, and I don't have to start thinking about what's inside of it. It removes us from decision-making and reaction and puts us back behind the scenes analyzing what's going on. Now, what does a playbook really mean? What does it look like? There's a number of products and technologies coming out that are really good at this. And so I want to show you, this is actually a slide I took from a company called Phantom. Phantom is a security automation or orchestration platform. They were the winner of the Innovation Sandbox at RSA this year. There are a number of other companies in this space, Swimlane and others. Some of the big vendors like Cisco, Blue Coat, ForcePoint or Raytheon, they've got a couple of names, IBM. Everybody's kind of getting into this orchestration or security analytics market. And this idea of bringing together disparate technologies and orchestrating their reactions. And so this is a slide I took from Phantom that they use as an example. And Phantom is a fantastic platform. It's really fascinating in what it can do. They're startups, so they're still kind of getting their, getting the whole platform built out. But I have to say, for a startup platform, I was pretty impressed at how mature this works. So the example they give here is malware infection, and then a number of events are automatically happen. There's a trigger event, and then or multiple trigger events, and then that then spawns this automated reaction or automation of events or things that happen. And so this is sort of a diagram of that, right? Malware, it gets detected through, a source fire IPS or Splunk, the SIM. So we can terminate processes. We can then snapshot systems, run these files through automated sandboxing and other products. We can block hashes. And if you look at it sort of in this perspective, so here's an example of that from the same sort of perspective. So the trigger, and this is one example of a playbook. One example would be, okay, you've detected malware on a host, right? It's a pretty common thing, right? Right now, all of these steps that you see, for almost every organization out there, it's a manual process. And that's the problem, is that people don't follow that process every time, or they're not around, or they're off on sick leave, or whatever. And because of that, these things aren't happening. And all these things really should happen. when you get a malware infection. With orchestration, you just automate the whole thing. And it's frankly not even that difficult to do. So the first thing you can do is you can trigger a scan for the entire host. Well, your antivirus product can probably do that. That's fairly simple. But then you instigate a snapshot of the host, save an image of that box, and send it off to another spot. After you've cleaned out the files, reboot the box. That terminates all the processes. Or you can just terminate the offending process. That's actually what Phantom can do. Rebooting is just a simpler way to do that. You can just say, okay, I've cleaned the box of everything I know that's on there. I've taken a snapshot of it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and reboot it. I've got a forensic image stored somewhere if I want to go look at it. So now I can just reboot it and get that user back online. Or even potentially restore from a known good image if you had like a, if you had a VDI or virtual desktop environment. The next step is then scan all the other hosts in the environment automatically. You've got a hash of the malware file, right? Take an MD5 hash and then scan the entire environment for that, any instance of that hash. You see any instance of it, kill it. Wipe it out of the environment. Secondly, instruct your SIEM appliance to find and tag every internet IP address that affected host, the one with the malware, everybody it talked to on the internet for the last 3 days. Tag all that, put it into a search parameter. So now you got a set of internet addresses. And you can very easily, and this is another step you can fairly easily automate, is you can compare that to a list of known command and control malware sites. That threat intelligence is relatively easy to come by. You can integrate that with your SIEM. And so you take that list and you say, okay, are any of the IP addresses on this list on a known command and control list? And if they are, tell the next-gen firewall to block that host or block those IP addresses on any list for the next week or the next 14 days or 10 days or whatever. And then the last step is instruct your Active Directory to reset the user's account password automatically. Just issue a reset. Again, very easy to automate. You could even restrict their access. Let's say if it was a real bad malware infection or it's a user in a particularly sensitive environment, you could lower their rights for the next couple of days so that they can't actually do anything, or their rights are severely restricted for a few days, so that if they try to introduce any more malware into the environment, it would get terminated. And lastly, you notify everybody. You send an email to the security admin, hey, I got this, here's all the steps I run, here's what's the result, and you send one to the user. Mr. User, we found something on your computer, no worries, we've automated it, here's all the steps we've done, we've cleaned it up, we've asked you to reset your password, we're taking care of you, we're protecting you, get back to work now. If I got that email, yeah, at first I might be like, whoa, what happened? But that's a safe zone. That's comforting. I look at that and I'm like, okay, technology's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's automated. It's taken care of this problem. It's dealt with it. I can go back to work now. I can go back to writing software, answering customer calls, closing deals. That's important for our sales team, right? Getting out there doing my job. And for millennials and for people of younger generations, this kind of stuff would be very comforting. It would seem very normal. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you have this? We have the technology. Why aren't we doing this? So this is how we have to automate. This is the next generation. This is the future of our information security program right here. Taking these playbooks. Now this is just one. This is a very obvious playbook. This is the most common use case we see. There's probably at least a dozen to probably 2 or 3 dozen other use case scenarios that we can build into this and build out a playbook for you. And you don't even necessarily have to automate all the reaction. Even just putting all the data in one place and then handing it off to an analyst makes that job so much easier. We actually use these kind of automation technologies in our Sherlock practice. We're starting to introduce them because it allows us to much more rapidly go through the data. We have the same problem in our Sherlock that everybody else has, which is we got to get through a lot of data. So the more we can automate that, the faster we can get insight and intelligence to our clients. And that applies to you guys as well. So what is the wrath of the millennials here? Well, as we talked about this automation issue, key thing I think we've all agreed to, or at least I certainly agree to, is that every breach begins and ends with people. The technology that you have Remember, it's only as good as those people. It's only as good as them. And while it can do a lot for you, right, it's ultimately the people who are important here. And we need to get the technology serving us because at some level, people are also the biggest threat we have. But they're also the biggest asset we have. We can make people become better. We can amplify their capabilities. So the real question is, what the heck are all these products doing for you? You spend a lot of money on these technologies. What is it doing for you? Why isn't it protecting you? Why isn't it making your people better at what they do? Why is it sitting there passively doing nothing or just spitting out gobs of data that nobody looks at? For the same token, what is this doing for you? We all know compliance, and I use PCI as an example, but there's other compliance things. If this isn't helping you get better, then, it's kind of that, why are we even doing it? Really, you look at all the changes to the PCI standard over the last year or so, they're all about, this business as usual sort of principle. Because PCI is trying to get all of us to realize it isn't just about a point in time. This has got to be something that's part of us every day. And worse than that, why are we letting these type of guys, Better Call Saul, these, cheeseball sales guys, kind of drive the whole process for us? We need to be in command. You see, we need good people to implement all of this automation. We need good people, and we need a workforce that gets it. Because the automation engineer of the future, well, it's that guy. It's not us, quite frankly. It's not my generation. These are the people who are going to take over the infrastructure, the information security of the future, and they believe in automation. And frankly, they're right. It's the only way we can get control over our environments. It's the only way we're going to be able to react to these threats at the speed and efficiency and consistency that we need. We're never going to be able to do it as individuals. The guy sitting in a console at 4 in the morning is never going to work. We need to build the next generation security program, and it will be built by us, but to serve the next generation of workforce, which is millennials. And ultimately what it boils down to is we're either going to adapt or we're going to get breached. And if we don't adapt, that breach is going to happen and you're going to lose your job. And that's an unfortunate reality. That's one of the big problems we have now for all of us in information security. If we screw up, we lose our jobs. Because leadership is saying, look, make it happen. And we got to make it happen, and automation is the way to do that. Okay, so last slide, and we're getting near the end here. And if any of you have any questions, it's a great time to ask them. I'd be happy to take those questions. But here's the main thing. What is it you got to do? So I put together just a quick automation plan at this point of, all right, I'm sold, Andrew. What have I got to do? Well, first things first, you got to start recruiting these brilliant millennials. You got to bring millennials into your environment, and you got to start building an environment for them because they are the future. Now, I have a whole other presentation about that principle. So that number one is a whole thing of how are we going to build the security program in the future that drives engagement for millennials. But that is going to be a huge challenge. You've got to be able to not only bring them into your workforce, but you've got to engage them and keep them engaged. Then you've got to start taking all these technologies you have and you've got to start automating the pieces that they do. You got to automate the endpoints. You got to automate your network blocking. You've got to be able to have sandboxing. You've got to have your data collection all in one point. You're going to need to have that SIM, whether you like it or not, kind of thing. And once you kind of get those automated pieces, then start mapping out what is a common playbook for you. And in many cases, the playbook for your business is probably very similar to the playbook of a lot of other businesses. That's one of actually the cool things that like Phantom and Swimlane and some of these automation platforms are doing for us is that they're allowing us to share common playbooks. Phantom actually has a whole social interaction place where you can share your playbooks with other people out there, which probably sounds a lot like your Facebook and other social media out there, right? Then we got to start implementing these orchestration technologies and controls. Now, the great thing is that these orchestration technologies, while they're very new, They're surprisingly mature because in many industries they've been around for a long time. We're taking a lot of principles out of other things like manufacturing, and when I'm bringing that into information security. And ultimately what we want to do here is we want to get our people out of reaction roles and into more analytical roles. Even your help desk guys. Want to put them in a role where they're spending less time fighting fires and more time asking the questions, why? Why is this happening? What's going on? What's the root cause? And how can we automate something here to react in a more consistent manner, and giving them the tools to do that. And these orchestration platforms like Phantom are going to give us the tools to do that. Okay, that's my presentation for today. Hopefully this has got you thinking about the importance and the value of automation. Hopefully it's got you thinking about the importance and the value of your changing workforce and why you're going to have to change that workforce to accommodate the demographic shift that's happening. And hopefully I've given you some good ideas, and you can take these back to your workplace and they can help you become a better security leader. So at this point, does anybody have any questions? I don't see any questions on my list here at this point. Oh, wait a minute. We do have a question. So somebody asked about IT migrating to the cloud. Let me see. I'm going to read the question here. I see IT migrating to the cloud environment. How does migrating to the cloud-based environment, how does automation of technology move to a world dominated by the cloud? Boy, you want to talk about the place to automate. The cloud's the way to do it. I didn't talk much about the cloud in this. I kind of left that off to the side. To be honest, probably because the assumption is that the way we look at it is kind of everything is moving to the cloud. And automation actually gets a lot easier when you move things into like AWS or Azure, because you can spool things up and spool them down very quickly. One of the beauties of those types of environments is if you see something wrong, you can snapshot it, you can scan it, you can test it, and you can reboot it, and you can reissue a new image, and you can have an entirely new, clean system up, running, and feeding processes without a lick of downtime. And so I see the cloud as extremely beneficial to automation. One of the great things about the AWS platform is that it gives you a tremendous number of tools to do automation, to do just general hygiene automation and technology automation. And they are actually integrating security automation technologies into that. Things like Phantom and Swimlane and some of these are Evident.io. Evident.io is a technology that can automatically conform and align your VMware instances, or I'm sorry, your AWS instances to particular known good platform states. That is great. And more importantly, again, if younger generations, that seems normal to them. And I have to admit, it seems like a good idea to me too. So I think the cloud and moving to the cloud is really underscoring the need for automation, and it actually extends your automation capabilities rather significantly. It's a lot easier to move things around in the cloud than it is to move it around on hardware sitting in your data center. So absolutely, huge factor. Great question, by the way, who asked that. And I would also say if you haven't moved your infrastructure to the cloud, if you're kind of holding off on that, it's time to start making strategy for that. Because the IT infrastructure of the future is not running on a bunch of hardware sitting in the data center. It's going to be running in the cloud. And you look at all the big upstart companies, the Ubers, the Netflixes of the world, they own very, very, very little hardware. And that's a great thing, because hardware is passé now. Hardware is for Amazon to own. Hardware is for Azure to own. You need to own the processes and the great ideas and the automation. That's for you to own. Okay, so I think we've hit the end of our time. It's right at 11 o'clock, so I want to thank all of you for attending today. Again, if any of you have any additional questions or comments about this, I'd be happy to take them. There's my contact information on the screen. Please feel free to email me or email the Anitian team. We'd also be happy to provide copies of these slides. And we'll also send you a link to the video when we put it up on the web. Everybody, have a great day. Thank you very much for coming today. And I look forward to hearing from all of you in the future. So long.